Hi, my name is Rodrigo Espinoza. I'm a student of the BA in ELT at the Universidad Pedagógica del Estado de Sinaloa. Teaching a second language is not simple. Teachers have to be aware of several aspects that will be you writing the verb to be on the board and have students repeating it. There are different activities that include cognitive, cultural, psychological, and physiological aspects that severely affect the influence the second language acquisition process. These aspects have a great impact on how learners feel toward the learning process, including self-confidence um, and oral production. Speech, as to what for me regards as a former language learner and as an university teacher now, speech has a great impact on how students feel regarding language learning. Rosas and Rayleigh, 2019, cite Mendes, 2011, and refer to this issue as their insecurity about their speaking ability. Of course, it is not the only implication affecting or influencing learners' performance and proficiency in the target language. Nevertheless, speaking as can be considered as a parameter for language learners. Personally, I remember having a frustrating feeling because I was not able to use the language appropriately. I can remember having the grammatical knowledge, as sometimes I see my students are able to produce acceptable writings or have the ability to understand written or spoken text. And although the language was there in my mind, the language was not used properly regarding sounds or pronunciation. As a student, I was exposed to an ESL program in the United States, which allowed me, different from my students in Mexico, to experience the phonetics aspect of the language in a more contextual form. And despite the fact that the language environment was culturally mixed, there were native speakers with a good pronunciation, which I guess allowed me to get an understandable pronunciation. Phonetics and phonology are an important aspect of ELT, as they are for native speakers, with the difference that native speakers do not consciously realize that they are, to some extent, phonetically accurate. Anyway, the importance of phonetics and phonology relies on how confident and consequently proficient learners can become as they improve their speaking skills. And as Rosas and Rayleigh suggest, if negative emotions are found to be more prevalent, it is important that teachers take steps to ameliorate those negative emotions and thereby maximize the achievement of low achieving students. There are, of course, several forms of psychological forms to support learners. Nevertheless, there are pedagogical forms too of helping them overcome anxiety or negative feelings in order to help them enhance their proficiency. Uh, Talking about the information in the second paragraph that I read, that I'm trying to explain here regarding speech, teachers can pedagogically help students. Of course, it requires teachers' attitude and professionalization. Part of this professionalization regards teachers' speaking skills, which sometimes is not necessarily uh, optimal. Learning about phonetics and phonology can help teachers gain better control of their speaking abilities. It is important to remember that despite the wide variety of exposure resources like internet, television, music that are available for learners to see and practice, the teacher is and will always be the the model to follow. The International Phonetic Alphabet can be a great tool to help teachers and students to improve their pronunciation, helping students find the phonetic similarities in their mother tongue to the target language can guide them in resembling the sounds they already know, help them identify the phonetic signs and their signify as well as the combinations, will certainly provide students with cognitive material they can consciously use to improve pronunciation. Uh, Becoming proficient students will be helped by showing them how to understand these symbols, thus making them feel they are really learning in the target language, and of course, as a consequence to this, acquire confidence. As a non-native speaker of the target language, I know I have deficiencies, and as one of my classmates said, we tend to pronounce the sounds as we read them, most of the times as the letters are named in the alphabet, the regular alphabet, making us model that will mislead students' pronunciation. It is hard to understand. It is hard to understand the whole phonetic system. Nevertheless, it is worth trying. The International Phonetic Alphabet regarding professional development, well, it is something that made me thought about how I pronounce or utter the target language. How can people understand what I say? I believe most of the people I talk to are teachers with some sort of expertise in the target language. And of course, I talk to people who are like native speakers, people who have spoken the target language more frequently than my students, and somehow are able to understand my speech. But I'm an English teacher, and how about my students? Well, will they always listen to my accent? Will they always have me near to help them? What will happen when they have to deal with a new teacher or with people who learn the language in a non-academic context where they are more with more tendency to pronounce words in a more colloquial way, let me say it this way? Of course not. My students won't be always uh, exposed to my only accent. But if we train them to listen and utter the target language in what is called uh, the standard English, which is uh, basically a received pronunciation, we will be providing and training them to understand what could be called the universal language. I mean, if it can be called that way. There are complications. Not every language user comes from an academic context. And what will happen to formal language learners and users in such situations? I believe that despite the fact in which learners cannot control who they talk to, providing them with an idea of how sound should sound is a form of helping them to be more proficient in listening and, of course, speaking. Regarding the learning experience, I noticed that I really need to prepare myself better in order to improve my pronunciation. It is complicated, but if I want to become a proficient teacher, one who's able to help students with their academic and self confident issues, it is of the utmost importance for me to improve professionally.